Hello, good evening. Good evening for me, or good morning, or good afternoon for you. So, let me see if all the settings are right. Ok. Metti tutto. Okay, so normally I think everything should be okay. Yes. Okay, let me close this. Okay. Ciao, ciao, good evening. So I hope that you can hear me well. And see me, it's not really important. The presentation will be more important. So yes, I don't know if anyone could tell me if the sound is okay. So yeah, okay, thank you. Thank you. And then I will also, in the chat, I will also post the links to my page on World Virtual Tours. And so I have 1 minute to go, and then I will officially start. And yeah. And yeah, I will wait until I officially start. So yeah. Hello, everybody. Good evening. Good evening. So yeah, I think everything is settled. Yeah, everything is right here as well, I hope. Okay, Poland, London. I saw some familiar names. So yeah. Hello from, oh yeah, Massachusetts. Hello. Yes, and then I can officially start. But before I start, I really wanted to apologize because last week I made a mistake. And so last week I only admitted a few persons. And so I accidentally didn't open the waiting room. So I thought I had admitted everybody, but instead the waiting room was still closed. So I really apologize because I wasn't aware of this. And so it seems a lot of people wanted to join but couldn't. And yeah, so I'm really, it was a terrible mistake on my end. But if you missed the first part of this this series about the Etruscans, it's available on YouTube. So just on the YouTube page of World Virtual Tours, under the live section, you can still find the first talk. So if you missed it, you can, it's available. At least for a certain amount of time. So you're very welcome to look at it. I really apologize if you waited last week. That was, yeah, that was really something I wasn't aware of. And yeah, then I think I can officially start. So I just wanted to check. So apparently the sound is okay, the image is okay. So then I can really officially start. So welcome everybody, welcome here to World Virtual Tours. My name is Patrizia and I'm talking to you from Italy, from a hill near the town of Perugia. Perugia was one of the most important Etruscan towns. This is Etruscan territory. I also have an Etruscan tomb, I always say in my backyard, so really nearby. So yeah, and so this is the second of a series of 4 about the Etruscan world. And So as I said, the first one was last week. If you missed it, it's still available on YouTube on the page of World Virtual Tours. You can find the links also on the website of World Virtual Tours. You also know this is World Virtual Tours. So all these presentations and also the live tours we do on site, they are all based on donations. So, in fact, we can keep them we can keep them going on because thanks to your support. And yeah, so let me then close the chat. I have my my how do you say, my I hope today I will be able to speak English, because now it's a week ago. All these days I've been, guiding a lot, also in Perugia, but in other languages. So I just wanted to say, I hope that, the words will come to me. So let me then close the chat, and I have my alarm clock so that I will try to not to go too much over time. So now I will close the chat and I will reopen it at the end so that you will be able to to ask your questions. Okay, so let me then share my presentation. Okay, so here we go. What is this? Wait a minute. Okay, of course I have to start with the first one. Okay, this is it. So yeah, this is the second lesson. So the second part of this presentation. So 4 series about the 4 episodes about the Etruscan world. And so today I wanted to talk about Etruscan women. So because Etruscan women, they really played a special role in the Etruscan society. So unlike, the Greek and the Roman women, so their contemporaries, they had a completely different way of living, you could say, and also different rights. And so before I start, I just wanted to remind you, for the people who perhaps didn't follow the first one, I just have 2 slides about just, where are we and what are we talking about, and so also when are we talking about. So we are talking about the Etruscans, and so the Etruscan was a very important civilization in central Italy, and more precisely the western part of central Italy. Here you can see this greenish area that in general we call Etruria. So even if Etruria never really existed, I mean, there was never a state called Etruria, there has never been a kingdom or an empire, there has never been a kind of central government, there has never been a capital of the Etruscans, but so the whole area, you could say Etruscan land, but so, we call it Etruria. And so it's mainly Tuscany, so today's Tuscany, the western part of Umbria, and then also north of Lazio, so north of Rome. So that's the area we are talking about mainly. And then when are we talking about? Well, the Etruscan civilization is really a very, a long stretch of history. So, it's something like 1,000 years, because we have a pre-Etruscan times already, in the 10th century BC. And the definitive end of the Etruscan civilization is considered to be the 1st century BC. So then, of course, it has already been Romanized. But so let's say it's almost 1,000 years. And of course, the people who lived in the 10th century were not really completely the same as the people in the 1st century. Just, think about our civilization. So the people who lived, even 500 years ago, 900 years ago, were not exactly, the same as we are. But so, this is roughly, but today, of course, I'm going to talk mainly about the heydays of the Etruscan civilization. And, you have to see it's between 600 and 400 BC, just to make it a little bit easier. But I'm also going to show you examples a little bit later on when there is already a Roman influence, because it's interesting that we see that the Etruscan area or the Etruscan land is going to maintain some typical Etruscan female kind of female identity that was completely different from the Romans. And so here we see just 2 examples of I mean, it's not really important, it's just to give an idea, so where we are and when we are. And then I wanted to start with a text, because I like that text a lot. It was written by Barbara Lambert. She has a website called History and Women, .com. So you're always welcome to go and have a look. And I'm going to quote her. So I'm going to read what she wrote. So it's not my text. I could never write a text like this in English. But so I'm just going to read it because, in just a few sentences, she says something very interesting. So it goes like this. If there were a prize for getting unfairly bad-mouthed in ancient history, Etruscan women would likely win hands down. The Greeks and later Romans, they said terrible things about them. Etruscan women, they attended banquets where they sat under the same blankets as their husbands. They were expert drinkers. They were very attractive. So that's what the Greeks and the Romans said about them, especially the Greeks. They even proposed to toast to anyone they choose. They really are depraved and exhibitionist drunkards. The Etruscans, they raise all the children that are born without knowing who their fathers are. The children live the way their parents live, often attending drinking parties. Now, hard to say where this all started. Did it start with Tanaquilla? Or maybe the bad rap began with Tullia, her successor, who arranged a series of murders, finally convincing her husband that her own father should be murdered, and then publicly driving her chariot over his body just to make sure he was dead. But surely it's unfair for the whole of Etruscan womanhood to be tainted by these extremes. One of the reasons that the Etruscans in general gained this reputation is that none of their literature survives. Their enemies got the last word in, literally, at least until archaeology came along to tell a different story. We now know that women in Etruria were accorded dignity and respect. They had a rich family and public and religious life. And speaking of those children whom so scandalously they raised, there are many statues showing women not just raising, but breastfeeding their children. Images so like the depictions of Madonna and Child that it's hard not to wonder at their influence on later religious Italian art. So yes, they love to party, but even in lavish elite tombs, their favorite things to take along to the afterlife included loom weights and spindle whirls, evidence of dedication to the home-based industries that made such a major contribution to their society's commercial wealth. Still, they were scandalous, these Etruscan women. They rode horses, and some even had their own chariots. And unlike Roman women who had no names of their own, Etruscan women passed on both name and rank to their children, along with distinct legal rights. From Etruscan inscription, we learn that Etruscan women could inherit property and even retain their own surnames. And this is different from Greece and Rome. And not only did they own their names, but they had a distinct sense of ownership of their bodies, as excavations of Etruscan healing sanctuaries have revealed, where miniature bronze or terracotta reproductions of the most intimate female body parts have been discovered, along with other votive offerings. Etruscan women may also have been literate if we believe that they could have read the vast number of objects with inscriptions that were used in feminine context. What a threat they truly must have seemed to other decently ordered cultures of the ancient world. And across society at large, their like was not seen again till modern times. So I think that's really a very nice, little summary about these Etruscan women. So I wanted to start because, there are so many examples, but I wanted to start with something local. So I live near Perugia, and in the hills just outside of the town of Perugia, there are a lot of burial sites, Etruscan burial sites, what we call necropolis. So huge, so vast areas with a lot of tombs. And of course, the most, famous tombs are the most, the most impressive ones. And so the most impressive one of Perugia is the Ipogeo dei Volumni. So it's an underground excavated tomb with several rooms. And so here you can see a picture of the main room. You see, there's like a roof structure. So they excavated it to make it look as if it's really inside a house. And then in the room at the end, that's where there are the several urns of the Volumni family. Now, Volumni in reality is the Latin name. The Etruscan name of this family was Velimna. But so, the most ancient urns, so the most ancient, the oldest members, I say, or the oldest urns, and they were buried, 200 years before the last one. And so on the last one, on the youngest one, on the more recent one already, it's written Volumni, and on the older one, it's written Velimna. But I wanted to show you this tomb because there's something very interesting at the entrance of the tomb. Yeah, this is a picture of the main room. So you can see in the middle, the largest urn. So these are all urns that have been, how do you say, they have been covered with stucco, so with a kind of plaster, and then it was painted, so that the paint has gone. So now we see it all white like marble, but so it was quite heavily colored in ancient times. But so in the middle, you can see a man, so the urn of a man. So that was all, to contain the ashes of the deceased. And so that is Arend Velimna. And Arend Velimna is the person, the man who, who could say sponsored this tomb, so who had it built for the members of his family. And so what is interesting is that there are 7 urns inside that room. 6 are men, and only 1 is a woman. And you can see her on the left-hand side. She's sitting like on a throne, and that is Velia. And Velia is buried amongst all these men, probably because she was a young girl when she died. So she wasn't married yet, or she was still very young. And that's why she's buried in that particular room together with her father, Arend Velimna, and then her uncles, her grandfather, and her great-grandfather. So that is, that is just a detail. But at the entrance of the tomb, there is a door jamb. So, it's all made in stone. And you see there are some letters written at the entrance. So normally when you enter the tomb, on your right-hand side, there is this kind of stone, vertical stone with a vertical inscription. And so this is seen from within. So when you're inside the tomb, you look towards the outside, you can see the staircase leading out. Now the staircase is modern in this case. So this is not the original entrance or exit, but you can see there is a text written, and it's written vertically. Now, of course, to make it more easy, on the picture, this is horizontally. So, you have to read the Etruscan language mainly from the right to the left. There are some exceptions, especially late Etruscan inscriptions. Sometimes they are written from the left to the right. But so here we have to read from the right to the left. And so you can see we have to start at the top on the right-hand side. And so the first word with these 4 letters is Arend. So Arend, as I said, Arend, the one who had this tomb built. And so the first word is Arend, and then the second word is Lard. And Lard was his brother. So in fact, we have Arend and Lard Velimnas. So Lard and his brother, Arend and his brother Lard Velimnas, they were, so now the second line, you have the word Artsneal. And Artsneal is a genitive, so it means, from Artsne. So Artsne is a female name, and Artsne is the mother of Arend and Lard Velimna, because what you can see is Artsneal Huzur, and Huzur means sons. So Arend and Lard Velimna, sons of Artsne. Then you see Suti Asilhese, so that means they built this tomb. But so what is interesting is that they only mention their mother. They don't mention their father. They say, Arend and Lard Velimna, and you saw, they have some very impressive urns, but, they only mention their mother, Artsnel Huzur. So you see, they were not afraid to mention only their mother. They, they were not ashamed to mention only the mother. That was really very typical and very usual. We have examples also from very important soldiers, for example, or kind of important heroes. And so they mention their mother, on their tomb, for example. And so here, in this case also, they don't mention the father, which is a bit perhaps strange because the father is also buried inside. But, they wanted to make sure that the mother was remembered. Now, the mother is not buried in that tomb. So where is she? I mean, why wasn't she buried in that tomb and no other female members? Well, yes, there's only Velia, as you can see, represented as a very young girl. So that's probably the reason why she's there, because she died very young. So here we have the Ardzne. Here you can see on the right-hand side, and middle you can see Ardzne. So Ardzne was the mother of Arnd and Lard, and also Velvelimnas, because in reality there were 3 brothers that are buried there in that tomb. And so Ardzne, she was the wife of Aule Velimnas. Aule is also buried in that tomb. And Aule was a son of Thefri Velimnas, who's also buried in that tomb. So these male members, 3 generations, are buried in the tomb, and then only 1 daughter. But you see the other ones, Ardzne, and then, her mother-in-law, Nufthene. So what is interesting, they found them in another tomb. So somewhere in the necropolis, I mean, not so far away, there was a tomb where at least these 2 were buried. So that is interesting, that there was a separate tomb for the females. So we don't really know why, because it's a very recent investigation. In ancient times, they were only interested in the urns, and they all mixed them up. So, they found urns in the tombs, and then they would just say, okay, this is a beautiful one, let's put it there, and that's an ugly one, let's put it somewhere else. And so all these family bonds, they were all destroyed, you could say, by this, now I forgot to put my alarm. But so by these, very ancient excavations. But now they're trying to put them back together. And that's very interesting that we have several examples of only female tombs. Now, also, women, they could have their own property. And we know that because it was written on certain objects. So here we have a beautiful black ceramic, so bukkero, vase, and so on the neck you have the text, so it's written underneath, but you have to read it from from the right to the left. So mine aiku, and so mine aiku, so I was given by aiku to arpa kamai. So that's another female name. So that's very interesting, that they could give gifts. And so it was a woman that would give it to another woman, and she would write it down, just to make sure nobody would forget it. And so this is not the only example. There are other examples of vases. For example, there are even examples of like big cooking pots, you could say, that were produced by a woman. So that she had a little workshop or a little factory, you could say, so also led by a woman. But now the only Etruscan woman where we really have more information about, because of course we have inscriptions, we have names on objects, we have names on tombs, but really a kind of biography, it's almost say the adventures. The only one that we really know something about is Tanaquil or Tanaquilla. It depends, in Italian we said Tanaquilla, in English probably Tanaquil. The Latins, also the Romans, it depends a little bit. But so Tanaquilla or Tanaquil, in Etruscan, it would be Tangvil. Tangvil is quite a typical and common Etruscan name. And this Tanaquil, here she's represented on a painting made in the 16th century by Beccafumi, who was a Mannerist painter. So as a matter of fact, this painting is in the National Gallery in London. And so it represents Tanaquil, and she's pointing to something, and I'm going to show you detail just in a second. But so Tanaquil, she was from Tarquinia. And so Tarquinia is was one of the most important Etruscan towns. They're still called the town Tarquinia there. But the Etruscan name of Tarquinia was Tarcun. And so Tanaquil or Tanaquil, she was from the town of Tarkun. And Tanaquilla, so I will stick to Tanaquilla because it's easier. So Tanaquilla, she was from a very important family. So she was from the high nobility of the city-state of Tarquinia. You have to know these city-states, they had this kind of elite, and then there was a middle class, there was a low class, and then there were also the slaves. But she was really from the upper nobility. And she married a man called Laucume Tarcun. And, he was more famous under the name Lucumon, which is a kind of contraction of this name. And so Lucumon, he was half Greek and half Etruscan. His father had come from Corinthe, and so he had to flee from Greece. He had arrived in Tarquinia, and so he was quite an important person. But as a Greek, as a foreigner, really, he would never be able to, to access the highest position in town. And so, but this Greek, Demerate was called, he married an Etruscan lady, an important Etruscan lady, and they had this son, Lucumon. And Lucumon was half Greek, half Etruscan, but again, he was not considered like a true Etruscan. So also, he could do a lot of things, but he would never be able to access the top position in the society of Tarquinia. He married Tanaquil, or Tanaquil married Lucumon. And Tanaquilla, that is already, she was from the high nobility, but, she could marry whom she wanted. She had decided she wanted to marry him, and so she did. That is already a kind of example that, she could, the women, they were allowed also their own opinion, you could say. And so Tanaquilla, she says, Lucumon, now, you are just half a foreigner, so you will never be able to be at the top position. Let's go away. Let's leave. Let's go to Rome. Let's go to Rome. Rome is not too far away, and Rome is in full expansion. They need young people. They need dynamic people. So let's go to Rome and make our future there. And so that's what they did. And so they took, on this picture, this is, of course, just an illustration. They are on a chariot. Now, in reality, they wouldn't have traveled on such a chariot. This is a male chariot, and this is, of course, or a representation chariot, or to go into battle or something. I mean, this is not something to travel with. So they would have more traveled in something like this. And so this is a sculpture on an urn again. So it's more like a wagon, like a wagon. It's almost like the wagons of, in the Americas, the pioneers and so on. So it's more something like that. So they would have traveled with something like that. There are other examples. Oh no, I just have this one. But we know that the women in the Etruscan world, they had their own means of transportation. Now, this is just a reconstruction of a wooden kind of wagon, a kind of, it's not really a chariot, but so, of course, very nicely decorated with bronze. So this was for a woman. Of course, this is an elite thing. This is probably also for a ceremony, perhaps for a wedding ceremony. But so we have examples, we have representations of women, driving their own, chariot or wagon, or however you want to call it. And so they were allowed to drive. So, not only were they allowed to drink, but they were also allowed to drive. And so that was, of course, something quite special. Especially, the Greeks, they were appalled by the fact that they were allowed to drink in public, you could say. And then the Romans, they were appalled that the women were allowed to drive. So, so this is just an example, but look how beautifully it's decorated. This is a detail. This represents the goddess Turan. It's a bit like the goddess Venus or the Greek goddess Aphrodite, but not completely the same. We always compare it with the Roman and the Greek gods because then, it's easy for us to identify, but it's not completely the same. If you want to know more about the Etruscan religion, next week I will give the presentation on Etruscan religion and Etruscan language. And then we can talk a little bit more about the more famous Etruscan divinities or creatures or forces. You can call them however you want. But this is beautifully made. You see, Turan, typically with her long braids, and then this typical conic head, wings, and then in this case she holds a dove, because dove is an expression also of fidelity. So probably that chariot was more for wedding ceremony. But here we have another example. You see, we have a lady sitting in this kind of, what is it? A kind of wagon with an umbrella. Now, I don't know if I don't, because they actually found umbrellas like these. So the structure was made in bone, and then of course with canvas they would cover it. And so they found these kind of umbrellas in tombs. But just to show, they could, publicly go around. But let's get back to Tanaquilla and Lucumon. So they are going to Rome. And when they're approaching Rome, you see in this illustration, you can see the temple of the Capitol Hill. But I mean, this is not an ancient illustration. This is just something modern. But so while they're approaching Rome, suddenly an eagle comes out of the sky, and the eagle plunges towards Lucumon and takes his cap and flies away with the cap, and then comes back and puts the cap back on the head of Lucumon. And Lucumon, of course, says, my goodness, what is this? But Tanaquilla, she says, this is excellent. I know exactly what it means, because the eagle is, of course, a synonym, you could say, of the most important gods, of the most important, divinities. In this case, the Greeks would say Zeus, the Romans would say Jupiter, but, the Etruscans, for them, the most important god was Tinia or Tina. And so the eagle, of course, very powerful. He takes the cap, but then he puts it back on the head. So it means, the gods are with Lucumon, especially the main god are with Lucumon. And she knew that, Tanaquilla, because, Tanaquilla, she was Etruscan. And the Etruscan, they, their whole life was about interpreting the signs of what we call the gods. I mean, a god, you don't have to see a god like a man with a beard sitting on a throne. It's a bit more complicated than that. But so they would especially look at the birds. There was a whole kind of, how do you say, there were, so a whole kind of category, category in the Etruscan society that would try to see the signs of the gods, especially in the birds. And so here you can see on this painting, the painting is from the 16th century, but you see she's pointing towards the sign. And on the sign, it's written, I'm Tanaquilla, and thanks to my divination skills, so we don't know exactly, was Tanaquilla herself, introduced in the art of divination. We know that women, so, women, they knew a lot about it. Or did she just know? We don't know that. But, thanks to her divination skills, she created two kings. First her husband, and then her servant. So what happened was this, that Tanaquilla and Lucumon, they arrive in Rome, and apparently it's really Tanaquilla who is pulling the strings. And so she says to her husband, well, you have to go to the king, and you have to try to serve the king. And the king in those days was Ancus Martius. Ancus Martius was the fourth king of Rome. And in those days, it was not really a dynasty. So you were a claimed king. And so Tanaquilla, she knows that, and she tries, she says to her husband, you have to try to become a servant, or you have to become close to the king, show who you are, and also that the people see you. And so Lucumon, he manages to become close to the king, to Ancus Martius. And so when Ancus Martius dies, the people proclaim, Lucumon, the new king. And so he becomes the king under the name Tarquinius Priscus. So Tarquinius is, of course, the man from Tarquinia, and Priscus means the elder. Of course, that's a name that comes later on. So you can only have an elder if you also have a younger. But so Tarquinius Priscus, that's how he became famous in the history books. So Tarquinius is a first Etruscan king, even if he was only half Etruscan. He was half Etruscan and half Greek. And so Tanaquilla, she becomes the queen. She becomes the queen of Rome. And immediately she introduces also, Etruscan fashion. It seems all the women wanted to follow and to be, to be dressed like her. And so this is a kind of summary also in one sentence. You see, Tanaquilla, she was one of the most influential women in the political history of Rome. So there were other women that were, of course, more influential, but that's much later. That's during the empire. There were some wives of certain emperors that also had something to say or had an influence on their husbands. Perhaps not always publicly, but there were. But Tanaquilla, we are talking about around 600 BC, so much earlier. So that is, of course, very, very special. And so she was very influential because as an Etruscan she was used to be involved as a woman in politics and religion. For an Etruscan it was was no big deal, you could say. And so here we have the household, just a modern illustration of the household of Tanaquilla. So, her husband, Tarquinius Priscus, is the king, and Tanaquilla, she organizes everything. She has a lot of servants, for example, and one of the sons of their servants, one day he's sleeping, and suddenly his head is on fire. You see, his head catches fire, and immediately people arrive with water, to put out the fire. But Tanaquilla says, no, you don't have to do that. I know exactly what this means. This is a very good sign. This boy is very important and will become very important. And so she adopts that child, and he will become the next king under the name of Servius Tullius. So here we see Tanaquilla with her own two boys, and on the right hand side this kind of soldier, that is Servius Tullius. So that is the boy she adopted. So he was a son of a servant. His name Servius, he was the name of so he was the son of a servant. And so she knew that he had a big future ahead, so she had raised him to become very important. And so one day her husband, Tarquinius Priscus, is fatally wounded. You see him lying on the left-hand side, and he dies. But Tanaquilla, she says, okay, let's not tell anyone that he has died. And she says, and now you, Servius Tullius, you are going to tell the people that he is wounded, but that he's resting. Don't tell anyone that he's dead. And in the meantime, you say, while Tarquinius Priscus, so my adoptive father, is regaining strength, I'm going to take over. And so for the next few days, Servius Tullius became appreciated by the people. He was like the successor of Tarquinius Priscus. And so a few days later they can finally reveal that Tarquinius Priscus has died, and automatically the people acclaim Servius Tullius as their new king. And Servius Tullius is going to marry, and he has he has two daughters. And you see, typically Roman, because that is then typically Roman, even if he was raised in a kind of Etruscan household, but typically Roman is that his two daughters had the same name, Tullia. So the daughters, they in Roman times, they would just take over the names of their father. So he had two Tullias as daughter, Tullia the elder and Tullia the Tullia Major and Tullia Minor. And it's in the end Tullia Minor, she's going to marry one of the sons of Tanaquilla, and she's going to say, now I want to become queen a little bit quicker, so let's kill my father, let's kill the king Servius Tullius. And so in the end, her husband does, and she writes over his body just to make sure he's dead, because she didn't trust her husband, And so Tullia, she was also raised in that kind of, half Etruscan household. So the fact that she can take a chariot and that she dares to do it, and that it made a lot of impression. But so that is, of course, again, something like an Etruscan inheritance. But this is, of course, not a very nice story about Tullia riding the chariot. But so let's go back to more the Etruscan tombs. For example, here we have a tomb in Chiusi, that's in Tuscany, one of the perhaps not so famous painted tombs. And so here we see a kind of dancing. Is it a ceremony, or is it more like a party or an exhibition? But so you can see a lady sitting under an umbrella. Again, here is a detail. Again, we have these umbrellas. And so she's sitting there on the edge of a kind of bench or a bed. She has her feet on this kind of footrest. And so, you know, they actually found footrests like this in ceramics. And then you can see on the left, there is somebody dancing. Now, is it a man or is it a woman? We don't really know, but he has a kind of skirt, this character. And you see these lines, they actually represent the movement. So probably this was a kind of dance where they had to, or not whirl around, but to go left, right, turn left, right, and balancing all the while something on their head, a kind of chandelier. I mean, it's not really sure what it is, but so they had to balance it on their head. And then you can see in this kind of container, there is somebody playing the double flute. And why is he standing in a container? Well, again, we have other examples. Now, let me see. This is another example. You see the same kind of scene. Again, somebody, you know, balancing something on their head and dancing. Here, again, you see the movement, the lines in the skirt. And again, somebody is playing the flute. Also on the left. So these are two distinct representations. But again, there is somebody in this vessel. And on the right-hand side picture, you can see somebody like having little balls. We don't know, was it a kind of ball or was it kind of fruit or was it a kind of sweet that they had to throw in this kind of vessel? So it must be some kind of ceremony, but it's because it's represented several times. But so the fact is that here you can see the woman. It's about the woman. So the woman is here the main character. She's assisting to at this kind of ceremony. Here again, in many tombs, already showed examples. We have man and wife that are just sitting next to each other. The woman is often represented with a very white skin and some red cheeks. So kind of eternal beauty ideal. And so on the right-hand side, the man has more color, but you know, they are on the same level. They are sitting on the same kind of bed, on the same kind of bench. So that is really something that you won't find with the Greeks and the Romans. Here, yes, that's actually the same tomb seen from the right-hand side. And also the women, they were allowed to attend, for example, chariot races. But I mean, they were on the same level as the men. And you can see that especially in the left-hand upper corner, you see there are the spectators. And actually, it's a woman who's raising a kind of stick. So is she giving the start of this race? So, you know, that is also something that is unthinkable in, you know, with the Greeks and the Romans. So they're really sitting on the same level as the men. And here's another. So here on the lower register, we have, again, a banqueting scene. And then above that, we have more like a wrestling scene. But on the very left and the very right, in the middle register, you can again see the spectators. And again, we have the women and the men just sitting next to each other on the same level as a spectator. And then, of course, we have these very famous sarcophagus in terracotta. This is the one of the Louvre, because actually there are more than two. So there are several ones but these are the best preserved ones. So here you can see man and woman. You see it was painted. You know, this was all painted. It's in terracotta, but it's painted. And you can see man and woman, you know, sitting peacefully and not only peacefully, but, you know, like lovingly next to each other. Yeah, the woman, probably she had something in her hands, was a kind of vessel. So that has disappeared. But this is, of course, very, very typical and very moving also. This is, again, the one of the Louvre, where the painting is also very well preserved. And then this is the one in Rome. So in Rome, in the Villa Giulia, the most important Etruscan museum, you also have a sarcophagus. You know, in reality, they found it in pieces. You know, they had to piece it back together. It's all in terracotta, so it was broken. Yeah, here you can see it from the side. I mean, it looks stone, but it's terracotta, so it's ceramics. And you see, you know, the man is barefoot, but the lady, she has these kind of little boots. And you can also see what she has under the upper garment. You know, the undergarment, it's like the Greeks, the chiton, so with a lot of folds. So that's also a typical garment that we see. But, you know, we also have stone sarcophagus. And actually, there are two. You know, there are two. And they are both in Boston, now in a museum in Boston. But look, this is something you won't easily find, in, for example, the Greek or the Roman culture. So, and even, here you can see they have a certain age. So these are not very, very young people. And so that's, of course, very nice. And then another one, this is another one, also in the Boston Fine Arts Museum. So as you can see, they are on the same level. And we in Perugia, we also have very nice urn. So this is the lid of the urn. Again, this is they call it the urna del bacio, the urn of the kiss. And because you can see these two people. So this in reality, it's the urn containing the ashes of the woman. The woman is called Tanya. And so here you can see there's a scene from the other side. So yeah, that's it's quite special, that you have this kind of saying goodbye, not only on the lid where you can see the couple, but also on the box. So wait a minute, oh yeah, because yeah, you can see that it's a third urn. It's a third urn from the left. So here you have 4 urns. You see that they're quite colored because these urns were all very, very colorful. Excuse me, if you want to see some very colored urns, in 2 weeks, I will take you to the museum. Excuse me. I will take you to the museum. And so it's very well preserved. I'm sorry. So in the museum, I will show you some incredibly colored urns. But I show this series of 4 urns because these 4 urns were found in the same tomb. They are 4 female urns again. So this was an urn with this was a tomb with only female burials again, and that's quite interesting. And so the oldest one is this. So you see the text, you have to read from the right to the left. Ani, so her name was Annie. Say Ani Vapsuntial, so from Vapsuntial, Sek. So Sek means daughter. So daughter of Vapsuntial. So the al is a kind of genitive. So Ani, daughter of Vapsuntial. So that was the oldest one. And then we have the daughter of Annie. It's Larti. So Larti Alfi, you see, Anialsek. So daughter of Annie. So she's the daughter of the former one. And then we have the third one, that's Tanya. So you see Tanya, the urn of the bacio, but also on the box, you can see there's a kind of scene of saying goodbye. You can see on the left, you can see 2 men. So on the far left, that's a kind of servant of the husband. And then the husband is saying goodbye to his wife. And behind the wife, there is a female servant. And you see, they're really saying goodbye. So that's quite amazing. Now, it's not the only one. In 2 weeks, I will show you the most beautiful goodbye scene that we know on an urn. But so, yeah, that's quite interesting. Here you see a detail. And so they're looking sad also. They're looking sad. So it was all painted. So the paint is not very well preserved. You can only see the blue background. But, the eyes, probably also the tears were represented. You can see the lady, she has this bun, so this typical hair, as she also has on the lid of the urn. And she's holding a kind of fan. So that's a typical thing. And then behind her is a female servant. And the female servant is holding a beauty case. And in that tomb, they actually found this case. You can see the reconstruction on the right-hand side. So the wood had not been preserved, but all the bones, so it's bone, it's not ivory, but the bones kind of covering, and also the metal edges. So they were preserved. And then also the handle of the fan, and then all kinds of details inside. They found like a pocket mirror. They found a kind of little box, probably with some rouge or with some color to put on the face. And then inside all these kind of, I don't know if I have a detail of that. No. So all kinds of little vials in ceramics. And so really a beauty case they would carry. And it's interesting. This is another representation of another urn, because here you can see it better. The servant on the left, she's carrying this kind of beauty case. So it's the only well-preserved beauty case they have of the Etruscan world. So it's in St. Perugia. In Perugia, they're very proud of it, of course. And then I wanted to show you just some other female sarcophagus or urn. Well, in this case, it's a sarcophagus because this was not for the ashes, but it was for the body. So they found remains of bones inside. And in reality, I'm showing this because mainly it's her sister is interesting, but this is Lartia Seianti. So Lartia Seianti, this was found in the area of Chiusi in Tuscany. And again, you see, this lady is very nicely represented, probably in a kind of bridal veil with a lot of details of her jewelry. In her hand, she's holding a foldable pocket mirror. So I'm going to show you a detail just in a second. But you see, it was all very colored. So often we like the kind of white, but in reality, this was very, very brightly colored, as you can still see. But it's not so much Larti Seianti who is interesting to us. Even here you have a detail. You have detail of all the, the earrings and the bracelets and so on, a lot of jewels. So, but it's her sister. Her sister is more interesting to us. Her sister, Seianti Tanunya Lesnana, she ended up in a British museum, but it's the sister of the former one. And she was found also in a tomb in Chiusi, a very small tomb. And this was also very colorful, but I mean, you can still see some of the colors. But apart from the nice representation with all the details, in this sarcophagus, they found a quite well-preserved skeleton. And there has been some research by the British Museum to try to find as much information about this lady. And there is, on YouTube, you can find a documentary on the research, on what, with all the details, because of course I cannot mention all the details and I'm not an expert in, in medicine or anything, but it's quite interesting. So apart from the representation, so I'm just going to read it. So, so they said that the body they found was probably between 50 and 55 years old when she died. She had at least one child, from the bones, of course, they could deduct it, that she had at least one child. So, very probably she was also married, because you can see her that she's represented, again, as a bride with this kind of bridal veil. That's a typical kind of position. So probably she's represented also quite young, because after she dies, she's probably going to join her husband who has died before her. So she represents herself as a bride. And but they said her lower body was particularly robust. So from the bones of the legs, they could deduce that she had been on a horse a lot since a very young age. So I can't tell you all the details about the muscles and about the shape of the bones, but so they said this is typical of somebody who has been riding a horse since very young age. And also she had the remains of a fracture that is a typical fracture of somebody who falls on a horse, when they are 16, 17 years old. So, they could say, so she was riding a horse. So from her, we know that, they actually rode. And so, yes, there was these remains of the big injury. And they also said she probably had a very bad oral hygiene because, well, that was in a very bad state, everything they found in the mouth. But so that's, of course, interesting. And they did a kind of reconstruction also of the, of the skull. Oh, yes, here you can see all the rings she's wearing on the left hand, and then this pocket mirror. See, and she has all the rings on the left hand. Could it be because during a banquet, she's represented as on a banquet, she would only use the right hand? That is something that we don't really know. Here you can see details of the bracelets or the arm bracelet. So very nicely represented. This is the foldable pocket mirror, So So they had it too because they liked, they liked to. That's also what the Greeks say, Not only they drink in public, they go in public, but they like to present themselves and to be beautiful. And so this is the skull of Sayanti. And so this is a kind of reconstruction how she could have looked at. But I mean, I don't know. This is just an hypothesis. And I didn't want to end with, more beautiful to end with this kind of representation. Oh, even she's leaning on a pillow. And if you look at this pillow, the textile, so the fabric of this pillow, that's also something very typical because we have representation, you see, of dancing women with these brightly colored textile, but also with a very contrasting edge or seam. So you see that it's really, could be also something very typical. And then, we have a lot of representations also of the women, not only as beautiful ladies who like to, makeup, but as mothers, as mothers. Also, as I mentioned before, this is what we call the mater matuta. So matuta means like a mourning goddess, even if goddess is perhaps a bit too much. But in a lot of sanctuaries and healing sanctuaries, you find representation also of these children, or here again, mother and child, that is also, of course, represented very often. And you find these are very small objects that they find in these healing sanctuaries. So, of course, as a mother, there's also, and so in these healing sanctuaries, you find, for example, on the left, that's a uterus. Uterus, which is also, of course, that you will find in these healing sanctuaries, especially water sanctuaries linked to water. And then, here's where we started with the Velia Velimna Arantial. So Velia Velimna, the daughter of Arant. And I just wanted to end perhaps with this picture. You see, seen from above, because there is somebody who was also trying to, it was a hairdresser in reality who wanted to see, the typical kind of hairdressers, because every year, and it's actually going on now, in Perugia, there is a kind of Etruscan festival. And Etruscan festival is, they have a lot of talks about the Etruscans, you have a lot of presentations, a museum, you have guided tours, and they also always try to, well, not reenact, but so, they try to find the fabrics or to remake fabrics or the hairdresses. So they're studying, of course, all the representation of the women. We also know that they did chemical analysis on certain remains of cosmetical, little vials where they found traces of cosmetics. And so we know that they also had a foundation kind of, it was not really cream, but it was more like clay with ochre, talcum powder. So they find it all. For the lips, they used or red earth or cinnabar. I mean, cinnabar comes from mercury. I mean, it's really highly toxic, but that's what they also used. Or for example, if you didn't have a lot of money, tallow. So tallow is a kind of grease fat, and so they would color it red. And they had all kinds of face powder and eyeshadow. They also had eyeshadow, green, pink, yellow. So so they did a lot of analysis. So in reality, they know what it was made of. And then we have some texts. I mean, the Romans then, they talked about, they said that before they would go to sleep, the women, but that's probably already the Roman women, if they would put all kinds of stuff on their face, like a mask, like a crushed onion in poultry fat, for example. It seemed that it would be good. But then, Cicero, he said, oh my goodness, the best scent for a woman would be no scent at all, because whatever they try, it's not always very nice. So, let me see, where is, I'm going to open the chat. So I hope you had a little impression about the Etruscan women. Where am I? Here. So I'm on purpose, so I'm opening the chat again. So on purpose, I didn't talk too much about, female divinities, because that's for next week. So next week, I'm going to talk about the religion. That's always very interesting, and also about the language. So for now, if you have questions, I will try to answer them, because let me see. And so in the meantime, so so on World Virtual Tour, so you can always click these links to to find links on the website of Virtual Tours for the other tours, the other presentations. Also for donations, that this is only based for donations, so this is what keeps us going. And let me see, because now so have any perfume been found? Yes, I mean traces. Yes, traces of all kinds of, all plant-based, of course. And Etruscan women sound similar to Spartan women. Oh, that's that's an interesting statement. But for many other reasons, I wouldn't think so. I wouldn't think so, that they are exactly the same as Spartan women. There is too much. I mean, Spartan women, I don't think they would drink just, in public, because then they would have been considered like courtesans. And so before the Etruscans, did any other civilization use the reclining pose? So typical of Etruscan art. Well, the Greeks certainly did. The reclining pose as a kind of banqueting, yes. Has hair. Every time there's it goes back up. So has hair survived to be tested for color additives? So I don't know about any analysis or no, because the vast majority was ashes. So it was cremation. So not all. For example, in the area of Cusi, as you saw, these two sarcophagus of the last one, so they were in the area of Cusi. There were a lot of burials, but I don't know about hair or about And so there was cremation, and so then they put the ashes and the little remains of bones in the urns. Were there angels in the picture? Yes, I know what you're talking about. No, these are not angels, but the Etruscans, they had kind of creatures. They represented creatures, female creatures with wings. That's probably what you talk about. And you will find them a lot in tombs or on urns. I will show them also next week. They are called vans. So vans are creatures that are mainly near the door of the tombs. They're guarding, the transition, the transition, the door you have to pass to the other world. So those are vans, and they often carry torches. So because they have to lead the way, they can show you the way to the underworld or the afterworld. And then did the Romans malign the Etruscan women because they had public rights? That's yes, they were very different. They were very different from the Romans, and so everything that is different, could say, because what was very different, for the fact that they would participate, yes, in banquets, and that they would just sit next to their husband. And for the Romans, the Roman, if a Roman woman would do that, only the courtesans would do that, to use a polite word. So it was very different. So the Romans, they said, oh no, they are not, they are they are terrible. So, in reality, the Romans, especially the Greeks said that, the Etruscan women, they're all prostitutes. That's what they said, because it was so different. So, was one of the women reading a book? No, no. So what they had in their hands was a foldable mirror. So we don't have representations of a woman reading a book, or anyone reading a book, really. Scrolls. So there are representation of scrolls. So next week I'm going to talk about the language, and I'm going to show you some representation of scrolls. So not really a book as we have, but more scrolls. So, and then you noticed his in Etruscan meant maid. Did that influence Latin or vice versa? Because yes, I know what you mean. So yeah, I don't know any Spanish, but in this case, I don't know it's the same root, because this in Spanish, heco is probably what is in Latin or in Italian with an F, fece, fecit. So I can't say 100% because I'm not really sure, but I don't think in this case it's the same root. I can look it up. I could look it up. On the tip screen, there are no decimals. 2. So I think 2 is 2 and not 20. I think 2 is 2. But I should have a try. I don't really know, but I think 2 is 2. Yeah. Yes, from women and the bikinis. I know there are some representation and the bikinis, but that is that's not in the Etruscan representations. It's where are the bikinis? Yes, I know. I think it's in southern Italy they found some, or is it even Greek, or is it even from more ancient? I should look that up. But I know there are some representation of bikinis, but it's not in the Etruscan world. Is it now in southern Italy, or is it in Greece that they found it? Let me. Is there a theory of why equality of women and men developed in Etruscan society versus the patriarchy of other cultures? Well, there's a lot of discussion about that, because it is clear that it's different, from these other cultures. But how did that come about? That is object of a lot of study. And I must say, here in Perugia, the last 3 now directors of the of the Etruscan Museum in Perugia are women, and they are really keen on, on solving that, or solving that, at least, trying to get an answer to that. But yeah, I'm also waiting on some developments. And so, did the Etruscans have the equivalent of the Temple of Vesta? No, so not exactly the same. So the Temple of Vesta in Rome, where you would, where they had to, where the Vestal virgins had to keep the fire eternally burning, where they were kind of locked up. They were not allowed to, or to have male company, for example, the Vestal virgins. So no, we don't know anything about something that's similar. But I'm going to talk about the Etruscan religion next week. So yeah, that will be interesting then. But as we said, so as I said in the beginning, there's no Etruscan literature. So we have some inscriptions, we have some longer texts. I'm also going to talk about them, but we don't have a real Etruscan literature. The Etruscan literature was certainly passed on also orally, that they would always, tell the stories and so on. But at a certain point, the Romans, they couldn't see the point anymore in keeping it going or keeping copying it, because also the Etruscan language had disappeared. And so at a certain point, it really got lost. We know that in the 1st century, there was Emperor Claudius. He had it all written down, again, a kind of encyclopedia of the Etruscan stories, but it was lost, unfortunately. So that is all lost. Now, why were the women shown blonde and fair? So I'm not really sure where you saw blonde, because most of it is more brownish here. So yellow here. So yeah, where did I see yellow hair? Because yeah, what I've seen here on I don't know if the last one, so that was not really yellow. Perhaps it looked like yellow, but it's actually all brown. I mean, what is the remains of the painting? Because now I'm looking back, but no, so perhaps it just looks like, but it's not really yellow or brown. So most of it is brownish. So in the first picture I showed, don't even remember what it is. I'm trying to look back. So and then so the language that you saw, the inscription, so there were mainly names, but it's Etruscan language. Okay, where is the first picture I showed? Well, let me try to look back. Yeah, in the first picture I show, yeah, but it's in reality it's not blonde. It's really I have it here in front of me. It's not really blonde. It's because you see on the wall, on that wall, it's all kind of brownish yellowish. So it looked like that, but it's not really yellow. The hair in reality is brown. But so because it's it's very old, it's on a fresco, and so you have this kind of these stains on the wall. So yeah. So yeah. So anyway, I hope you had a little impression. And next week I will talk about religion and about the language. That will be a challenge to put it in one presentation. But we only have 4 presentations, and I absolutely also wanted to take you to the museum. So next week it will be religion and language, and then in 2 weeks I will be in a museum where I will show you, live some of the funerary art. So yeah, so I hope you had a little impression. Thank you very much for your joining me. And so again, how can you find week 1? Wait, I'm going to, here is the link. So now I'm posting the link for the first one. So you can just click on the link and then you will normally be shown on YouTube. So the first episode. And so I hope you will join me in the third episode next week. So thank you very much. And so for the person who couldn't see it, well, try then also this one normally is on, you can find it on YouTube. So there, hopefully you will see the images. So thank you very much again. Hope to see you soon. Thank you. Bye, everybody. Bye-bye.